Okay, so we have to continue our trek through factoring. So let me put up the title as I usually do. Up there on top. Okay, where are we? No. Here we go. Factoring. And this time we are talking about, this is the third one about factoring, so this is C. Okay, now we enter into the following phase of factoring where we have to factor a trinomial. So I'm going to call it problem number 1 all over again. Here's the one. It's going to be reasonably easy. You might not mind this one. Minus 8x plus 12. So it's a trinomial. There's an x squared there, but it's just, what's the coefficient? Here's a vocabulary word. Vocabulary word, coefficient. The coefficient of any term is the number in front of it. So the coefficient of x squared is 1. The coefficient of x is minus 8. If I put another example, minus 43, x to the 11, the coefficient of x to the 11 is minus 43, right? So that is the vocabulary word coefficient. Now, there's going to be a big difference between this problem number 1 and a problem that I want to do in the future. Don't get confused now. I want to do a problem eventually, relatively soon, 10y squared plus 27y plus 5. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for this problem right now, but I'm putting it up on the board for a reason. I want you to contrast these two problems. This is the easier one to factor. This is the easy one to factor, and that's the harder one. And the difference, the reason why, it's not that hard, but there's a different method. They have two different methods. There's two different methods for these two types of problems, right? I'm putting all this English stuff on the right-hand side out of the way. Right? There's two different methods. Two different methods. So when you have if the coefficient of x squared is positive 1, like in our case, we got a relatively easy story. If the coefficient of the y squared or the x squared or the z squared is something that's not 1, something like 10, it's not 1. If it's 1, fine. If it's negative 1, not good. If it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more, then it's not good, so to speak. It's a little bit different. It's a harder method, a little bit harder. These are a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm really emphasizing that you have a coefficient of 1 in front of this x squared, and you know you're a little bit more on easier street. Here's how to do it. Put the 12, right? This is scrap paper work. Not the answer yet, scrap paper work. Put the 12 over here, up on top. Put the coefficient of the middle term, the x term, underneath it, negative 8, and you got to solve, and it's going to sound funny, you got to solve a riddle. What are two numbers that when you multiply them you get 12, and when you add those same two numbers together you get negative 8? Riddle. This is, I'm putting my English over here, I'm putting all the junk, so to speak, on the right-hand side. Right? Give me a chance to get to the right-hand side. Here we go. We are solving a riddle. What are two numbers that when you multiply them you get 12, and when you add them you get negative 8? So the answer is negative 6 and negative 2. Multiply negative 6 times negative 2. What do you get? You get 12. Add negative 6 plus negative 2. What do you get? You get negative 8. Get the scrap paper out of the way. As soon as you find those two magic numbers, you solve the riddle. As soon as you solve the riddle, this problem is over. This trinomial turns into two binomials, x and x. One, you put one of the magic numbers, negative 6, and the other, you put the other magic number, negative 2, and the problem is over. Multiply this, use FOIL, you'll see you'll get back to exactly what you saw before. That's how to deal with factoring a trinomial that looks like this. So let's practice what we just learned. Let's do exactly the same type of problem. Problem number 2. What if you got y squared minus 9y plus 14? Okay, let's solve the riddle. What is the riddle? Two numbers that when you multiply them together, you get 14. And when you add them together, you get the middle coefficient, which is minus 9. A times b has got to equal to 14, and a plus b has got to be equal to minus 9. What are the two magic numbers? Answer, negative 7 times negative 2 is equal to positive 14. Negative 7 plus negative 2 is equal to minus 9. Those are the two magic numbers. As soon as you get the two magic numbers and you solve the riddle, you're done. Open up a parentheses with a y in it. Open up another parentheses with a y in it, because it's y squared, it's not x squared. X squared turns into x and x. Y squared turns into y and y. And now, next to this y, put a negative 7. Put next to this y, put a negative 2. And they're both questions have been answered. Both problems have been answered. I didn't circle that one up there. I'm circling it now as I circle this. Those are the answers to the two problems. The problem is over. We factored it. It's done. Okay. Now, that brings us to the problem that I put up over here. And I told you it's going to be a little harder, and it's going to have a different method. So problem number 3 is that we've got, let me get this out of the way so it doesn't confuse us. And we've got all this space to work with if we need it. Problem number 3 is to factor 10y squared minus 27y plus 5. You'll notice that the coefficient of y squared is not 1 anymore, not like our first two problems, and therefore we have to do a different method. It's not going to be radically different, but it's going to be different. Be careful. Don't mix up the two methods. Step 1, here's what you got to do. You go to, it's also going to have a riddle in it, but it's not going to be exactly the same. You go to scrap paper, and you first multiply the coefficient of y squared, 10, times the last term, the regular number, right? You always put it in order. 10, first the y squared, then the y, then the number, or first the x squared, then the x, then the number. Okay, what's our first step? Multiply 10 times 5, which is 55. Put it here. Then take the middle coefficient, which is negative 27. Put it here. All right, now, what are two numbers that when you multiply them together, you get the two numbers, when you multiply them together, what did I just do? I made a mistake. I'm sorry. When I make a mistake, I mix you all up. I apologize. 10 times 5 is not 55, it's 50. What am I talking about? I apologize. When I do this in class, I will probably be flagging it right away that I made a mistake, but we're going to correct it. I apologize. So first thing that you do is take the 10 and multiply by 5, and you get 50. And then you take the middle coefficient and put negative 27 underneath it. Okay. Now, solve the riddle. What are two numbers when you multiply them together, you get 50, and when you add them together, you get negative 27. What are those two numbers? What two numbers will do the trick? When you multiply them together, you get 50, and when you add them together, you get negative 27. This is a little harder riddle to figure out. The answer is 25 times 2 is 50, and negative 25 times negative 2. I'm making a couple mistakes here in this video. I apologize, but at least I caught this pretty quick. Negative 25 times negative 2 is positive 50, and negative 25 plus negative 2 is equal to negative 27. There's our two magic numbers. Okay, now, what do we do next? Very nice. We got the two magic numbers. If you use these as the answer, you'll be wrong. These are only going to help us get to the answer. Our magic numbers are negative 25 and negative 2, but they are not the answer. I can break down negative 27 into two parts. I want to break it down into two parts. I'm going to leave the 10y squared alone. I'm going to leave the 5 alone, but I'm going to break down negative 27y. I could break it down into negative 26 and negative 1. I could break it down into negative 10 and negative 17. But no, these two numbers guide me in how to break it down. Break it down into negative 25y and a negative 2y. That's perfectly legitimate. There's nothing wrong with it. I didn't break any rules. I just took this number and broke it into two pieces. And now we factor by grouping. Split this down the middle and factor by grouping. We learned how to factor by grouping. Let's get the GCF of the left-hand side. There's a firewall now. And let's get the GCF of the left-hand side. What will go into 10 into 25? Answer, 5. Highest number. What will go into y squared and y? Answer, y. Let's go over to scrap paper. We have some scrap paper here. Let's take care of 10y squared divided by 5y. And let's take care of negative 25y divided by 5y. 10 divided by 5 is 2. And y squared over y is going to be a y. What about this? Negative 25 divided by 5 is going to be negative 5. And the y's cancel each other out. So that's it. Now for the factor by grouping, we hope for the best. I'm going to write 2y minus 5 over here and figure out how to get from here to here. What is a number that I can multiply 2y minus 5 to get to minus 2y plus 5? I just have to flip the signs. That number is negative 1. Negative 1 times 2y is negative 2y. Negative 1 times negative 5 is plus 5. And now we're done. The problem is over. There's a match here. 2y minus 5 and 2y minus 5. I did it on purpose. I was hoping for the best that it would work out, that I put the 2y minus 5 on the right-hand side. Everything worked out. 2y minus 5, I put one copy there. And the two leftovers, 5y minus 1, I put in their own parentheses. And here is the bottom line, literally, answer of this problem. That's how you factor a situation where the coefficient of y squared is not equal to 1. You've got to multiply 10 times 5 to get to 50, and then put the negative 27 underneath, solve the riddle. The riddle does not get you the final answer like it did in our first two problems, but it tells you how to break down negative 27 into its two parts, and then you factor by grouping. Once you finish factoring by grouping, you have the full answer. Okay, that is going to end our video over here, and we can try some more. We can do more factoring on our next video.